Too many times we put labels on people. That's what all these stories did. They
Yeah.
conveniently found this moniker. Brat Pack was clever. Wolfpack is clever. But you're identifying people, not objects. And we objectify. And when we say even somebody's a bad person or they're evil, we're identifying that whole person rather than looking at the parts and pieces, the fragments of that might feel the way they do, that might behave the way they do. And how can I own a behavior if the behavior is said to be all of me?
Jump online, it's a digital zoo where everyone's a star while almost nobody's true. They want to be seen, they want to be loud, shouting in comments, trying to stand out in the crowd. No need for connection, just want the fame. Laugh at the chaos, try to control the game. Like monkeys in a circus, throwing crap that they supply. While when cornered in real life, they find excuses or just deny. Oh, click like and scroll away. We're all just actors in a fake cabaret. Say what you want and I hope you don't forget. We're losing our integrity in the internet. Where's the respect? Where's the grace? Human billboards hiding pain in cyberspace. We claim we're victims of social media.
Hey guys, another episode of Emotional Algebra and another episode with Tara Lombardo.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, so welcome back, everyone. And here we have an interesting discussion today. And we started with an interesting song, didn't we, Tara?
I love it. I love like the vibe of that one. Yeah, some of them are so soulful and literally can make you cry. And that one is like wakes you up in the morning.
Well, it's kind of a very, I created it to be kind of a circusy song because, what is social media and the internet and all these social media sites? It's like a circus. And
yeah, I like the one line in there, something about throwing feces.
Yeah, yeah, like monkeys throwing crap that they supply. Yep.
Yeah,
And that's it's
right.
so again, just bringing those ideas through, helping us to look at different facets of society, and all the songs I really try to do tries to really help people really think deeply about what they're doing. And then, as you'll get to the end of the song, I hope you'll all click on it to listen to it, the guidance it provides through the end of the song to give some direction on meaningful resolutions to the issues as we'll get to. And the reason we play that is it's an intro to what we're going to talk about today. So, Tara, where this idea came from is I saw a documentary by Andrew McCarthy called Brat. And it was on Hulu, and it was all about the Brat Pack and how that one article changed the trajectory of so many careers. And it was a really interesting story. And I thought about how many stories through time, just since that time, have drastically affected the lives of people based on the media. And now we get into the internet age. We'll walk through that and also then into social media. And we want to see the power of the written word in this and really the history behind it. And that's why, to me, a lot of times we have so many imitators trying to repeat those patterns again.
Yeah, I mean, words have power, and I preach that all the time. So I'm a former journalist who had the power to write whatever I wanted to write, to tell whatever kind of story I wanted. So there's a great responsibility there to make sure that you are writing with empathy, with compassion, and with a truthful heart. And now with the world of social media, there's no checker. The FCC can't really keep up with everything. The FCC was behind when I was in broadcasting 10, 15 years ago. So we really are in this slippery slope. And I think we can all kind of see what it looks like when, when you don't have those fact checkers there. And opinion, when held by a position of someone in power, can really spread like wildfire. And I'm kind of an interesting case because I also have two kids who are actors, and it's like I have to be very careful that I didn't put them down a path that now I can see so clearly that it's like, oh, if you go Disney will market the hell out of you. And then when you come out and you want to go do HBO or, you know, a feature film, a documentary, you're always going to be that Disney kid. Because how do you want to do marketing? So it's a really wonderful idea. I love that we're doing this because I think we're living it every day, but we don't really see it. It's one of the things, you know, that has just become the norm.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what also came to mind in doing this episode at this time is I've done episodes on social media. I've done multiple episodes on the media and the power of the media to affect. And now after our discussion on Sonder last week, I want people, or the last 2 weeks, you know, it's a long discussion, so turn it into 2 episodes, but I want people to really think about the idea that all these people that are written about, all these people you make comments about, all these people that you have these and cast aspersions on and have these attitudes and judgments about, all have their hopes, their dreams, their wishes, their wants, their worlds, their psychology, their views of the world. And that's the thing that I really wanted to bring attention to, is to double think what you hit. And that's why even in the song, you know, again, when you listen to the song, people, you'll hear again, think twice before you click, before you hit send. And that's what I love about Outlook, is when you send from certain accounts, it'll give you that 30-second pause. Do you really want to send this pause?
I do.
Yeah, exactly.
I was mad. I do.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and dive on into this. So here we're moving into the evolution of the public stockade. The weapon of public shame has evolved from the printing press to the smartphone. So again, this is an LM notebook LM slideshow. So for viewers, just to give that acknowledgement to this and bringing all the content that I brought in. And again, it just is really saying this isn't something new. It's just an evolution of the same issue. And as we start on this discussion, we're moving into, again, to me, the first defining story that I wanted to cover was that Brat Pack. And even if you look at this cover, for those who are viewing it, you see multiple images of Molly Ringwald, multiple images of Andrew McCarthy. So, you know, in creating this, but the image it had of Emilio Estevez, what do you think of that image there, Tara?
You know, I love it because to me, here's what that image portrays. Back in the day, there was one editorial section, and everyone would go there for like the opinion. And for those who are of an older demographic, like Miss Manners, there were very few opinion sections. Now we're bombarded with it, and to me, like that image is like what have we done? So because now we're bombarded with opinion, where before very limited.
You know what they say about opinions, you know?
Yes, I do.
They're like, you know what? And everybody's got one, and most of them stink. So just to kind of go through who is in the Brat Pack, we have Emilio Estevez, Molly Ringwald, Rob Lowe, Andrew McCarthy, Demi Moore, Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, Anthony Michael Hall. So just that's who with a little research was in there. They also sometimes clump Tom Cruise in there, and oh geez, you know, a couple other people, but those were kind of referred to. And it came after the movie Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire. Those two kind of movies are what brought that together, which is why you had some people who weren't in St. Elmo's Fire, but were in the Breakfast Club. But it was that group of young adults that really changed the movie world. It gave the idea that young adults could be leading actors and actresses and carry these movies and carry the box office. That's what really the change was with this group.
Yeah. And, you know, we're seeing that shift now with women. It's like, well, men always have to be the leading role. And it's like, you know, in recent years, we've challenged that by having women as the leading role, with Wonder Woman being one of the first ones and being such a massive box hit. And it's like, oh, look, a woman can carry the box office. So I think it's getting out of those norms that we're taught for generation to generation. I mean, this group of actors are remarkably talented, and their legacy shows that. Yeah.
Well, you know, and even what happens when we have change, and these denoted times of change in the culture, is you're often going to have envy, you're going to have jealousy, then envy and jealousy. Envy lets us know when somebody has something that we'd like to have. Jealousy lets us know when somebody has something we feel like we need to have. And so in this situation, they interviewed in the Brat's documentary, they interviewed the author of that article. And when you heard his responses to Andrew McCarthy, he was so defiant still to acknowledge his own emotions that drove him to make some of the comments. And he kept defying or denying and just minimizing the power of that article. And you could see Andrew McCarthy was trying to be professional, but I could also kind of feel like he was like going, really? 30, 40 years later, and you can't take ownership for what you said and what you did? Well, some of it was kind of harsh. So I think in that we got to recognize our people's tendency to rationalize, justify, and minimize the power of their comments, whether they were in these articles or whether they're in social media, or if you can't take it, get out of the kitchen. If you're a famous person, well, you got to be prepared for this. Well, how many people whether we look at like even a Hannah Montana, that show and how it affected, oh gosh, what's her?
Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus, thank you. How that show affected her trajectory, and how do young adults prepare for this who know they're going into acting? Like you said, your kids are in acting, and how do just regular kids prepare for this in social media? So we keep touching on this. And when we go back to that idea of Sonder and understanding each people has their own world, their own views, their own attitudes, I think that's what we really want to keep in context as we're going through this discussion. And each person looking to take responsibility for their role and how they fed some of the chaos we see today.
Yeah, I think another big thing for American society is we love to build and then tear down. Build and then tear down. It's like we support. Yes, go, but don't get higher than me.
Yeah.
Because when you get higher than me, now we have a problem and I'm going to have to tear you down. And that's not for all of the masses, but I think that's for a large majority of people. And it really does go back to, why do you have a problem with that? And that's where you have to start peeling back the layers and going, why do I not want this person to do amazing? I was just cheering them on. But now they're in a stratosphere that I only dream of. So now I'm not okay with that. And why is that? And I think once you pull that back and go, why am I not okay with it? And it's like, oh, wait, I have unrealized dreams, potential, whatever it is, then that helps you get a better understanding of yourself so that you can move forward in a better, more productive, healthy way throughout life.
Well, and there's envy and jealousy. And then the protective emotions for envy and jealousy are going to be first, remember our defenses. So we're going almost in order of our shows. Cognitive defenses, rationalization, justification, minimization, denial, projection, all those cognitive words we use that help us protect ourselves. And then we have the anger, rage, arrogance, flippancy, defiance, sarcasm, and hatred, irritation. And then vengeance beyond that, those secondary protective emotions. So we want to see how they're playing out. That and all this, Tara, goes back to our hierarchical views on power that we in our mission here are trying to help people to see the value of equity and changing to equity and seeing everybody's gifts and strengths. So that's where we really want to understand and look deeper, look below that desire to respond and look at the feeling underneath and see the ways that we can shift this. So I think we'll also now remember an extremely powerful story that we've had pretty famous people weigh in on the Wolfpack of these Central Park 5 that were falsely accused and then put in jail, lost time of their lives for years, and still people, even though they have been proved innocent, still people, because they don't want to be wrong. And remember that idea of what if I was wrong? If they were wrong, then they'd have to change course. They'd have to acknowledge, they have to take responsibility for their actions. That's another piece that people in hierarchical models of power don't want to do. They don't want to take responsibility for their faults or flaws because then guess what? They have to feel bad, wrong, weak. They might feel failure, stupid, embarrassed, humiliated, worthless. We got to realize those emotions are trying to teach us things, not tear us down. It's how we, though, have learned to use them in our culture that's led to a lot of this denial of even seeing what is actually truth. And that's the struggle that we have today, I think, in a lot of these stories we see.
So, Eric, I think one of the biggest things that I would love to ask you is the people that are watching this, I think for the most part, are the ones who want to better themselves. They're going to hear you. This is going to resonate with them. The people in the world that you just described may or may not be
Mhm.
those people that are watching, or even recognize that they are that person.
Yes.
If they're not digging. So
Yeah.
how do we, as someone who may be friends, frenemies,
Mhm.
enemies
Mhm.
with someone like that, what do you do?
I think sometimes even if you like what you're seeing and you see somebody who you feel like is behaving this way, you say, I saw this really interesting story that went all the way back through and talk. Remember the Brat Pack? And you get them interested. Say, you might want to take a look at that show, and I'd love to talk to you about it. I think sometimes when we can plant seeds gently. So in my job, what I often tell people I'm doing is I might present something that I pretty much feel is pretty on target, and I know it might be a little too soon for them to embrace. I'll put the idea in there, said, I'm going to scratch the soil on this and we're going to drop a seed in that. And if that seed grows, great. If it doesn't grow right now, okay. I just want you to be aware of that seed and see if you feel it start to grow over time. Because I know sometimes things are presented to people that they might not be ready for. And
Mhm.
just realize, what is my goal here? Is my goal here to hurt you? And they'll be like, no. Is my goal here to help you? Yes. So recognize my intention, because what our mind wants to do is saying, you're hurting me. And when we feel hurt, remember those fear-based emotions says something could happen that hurts me. And when we feel emotions that are pain-based, we often want to get away from those emotions. So
Mhm.
taking the time to scratch the soil and plant that seed can be important, and just say, just take a look at this and see how this can help you here.
It may help. Just say
Yeah,
it.
I'm
There's
just saying, right? Well, and that's where we're going to get into narcissism later on. And at the core of every narcissist is a fractured ego, and that's what we got to look at. Is that what you're talking about, Tara, too, is the difference again between our ideal, our feel, and our real selves. And people don't want to see their real self because it might result in them feeling things they don't want to feel. So they're going to go ahead and twist and turn everything they can do to see themselves in their idealized view of self. I'm not a persecutor, because that's really playing the persecutor. I'm the rescuer, or I'm the victim. I'm the good guy. And that's where we also want to see the interplay of those roles in this dynamic.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that I'm not pointing out or judging. It is literally where people are in their lives, and they do
Mhm.
not feel as if they are being a bad person. I think most people
Yeah.
who are deemed a quote unquote bad person, in their hearts, I don't believe they feel that they're doing wrong. So that's an interesting topic that we
Yeah.
could get into as well. But it's literally what we talked about last week, where it is, you're a product of your experiences, and for
Yeah.
them that may be survival.
Right. And I do think the idea actually of saying bad person. So too many times we put labels on people. That's what all these stories did. They
Yeah,
conveniently found this moniker. Brat Pack was clever. Wolfpack is clever. But you're identifying people, not objects. And
right.
we objectify. And when we say even somebody's a bad person or they're evil, we're identifying that whole person rather than looking at the parts and pieces, the fragments of that might feel the way they do, that might behave the way they do. And how can I own a behavior if the behavior is said to be all of me? And that, I think, is really the key here, is
Yeah.
to look at that and why we have so much denial and defensiveness and protectiveness of these things. So here we're going in further to the spectrum of labeling. Is for listeners, we have a table there that talks about frivolous branding. So with the Brat Pack, and it says, sell magazines through catchy cultural categorization, the impact of that: career stagnation, loss of individual identity, and a permanent reduction of serious artists to youth culture characters. And you're going to remember the age of these kids and young adults getting into this field it is a very treacherous field at times, depending on who's saying or doing what, and what the motivations of individuals, agents, companies that often see the bottom line of the money. They don't look at the really that Sonder side of the individual. And then the media that, as we talked about, has issues of jealousy, wanting to sell, wanting to market, needing to stay on the edge, So we see that continuing to happen with this frivolous branding idea that reduces people to the object. The next piece talked about Richard Jewell. I'm sure, Terry, you remember from also being in Atlanta, the
Yep.
infamous nature of Richard Jewell, who was somebody who wanted to do the right thing. He saw it, tried to get attention to it, and of course they had to find somebody to attack that with a falsely. He was falsely accused by an FBI leak that went out, and as it says here, he died at 44 years old. So 3 months to exonerate him, and dying early. What was the effect on him? Who really just seemed like, when you saw him on the news, very innocent, seemed almost naive, not really to have a high intelligence, and tried to help people in what he did. So that's what we want to realize. And then the idea of retaliation, for some who might remember Sinead O'Connor, she passed away in recent years. So she had some famous songs in the 80s, and she took a stand, political stand, and how she was just destroyed by taking that stand after her. She held up a picture of the Pope, and I believe she tore it in half. And she was just, again, politically destroyed for that, and really affected her career. And I think we have to think about the ways we take our stands. Are there ways that we can put ourselves out there that don't have to be so oppositional? Yet, I think that's when we look at what people learn in their culture, that might be the way they feel that they need to get their point across too.
Yeah, and I think all of this is in the title of this, labeling. And it's what you spoke about, bad people, narcissists. We have to put people, not have to, but we tend to.
It behooves us to.
It behooves us to put people in boxes and label them, because it's the easier thing to do. And this is why we have a hard time when someone is so unique. We don't really know what to do with them.
I'm even going to change that behoove. We tend to. We don't have to. We tend, because behoove is what's in our best interest. Tending to is what is easiest behaviorally.
Oh, then we definitely tend to. We tend to call them a free spirit, or we can't quite put them anywhere until we do. And then it's like, well, this is where they fit, and that's what we're going to do. And whether they're a troublemaker or whatever it is, it really is interesting if you can kind of go through your life and kind of look at people, whether it be on social media, whether it be in your friend group, your family, your children's friends, your parents' friends, and see how you categorize these people, because we tend to do that. And we tend to do it more from a negative standpoint. And that's been something that I've worked really hard on, is even the kids who are mean to my kids, when they were little in school, it was like, I would tell my kids, well, what is one good thing about them? Let's talk about one good character trait that we can say about them. And of course it's like, Mom, nothing.
Yeah.
They're awful.
Yeah. Well, and that's that good, bad, right, wrong, strong, weak, win, lose. That's the labeling of dichotomies, and it's supposed to make the world easy for us. If I put a label on somebody, I can put them in that box and not have to think about it again.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, is not, again, seeing the whole person. That's too much to have to think about all their features, behaviors, attitudes, histories, beliefs. I mean, look at Sinead O'Connor. She grew up in Ireland, which you had your two sides of that. You had the Catholics and you had the Protestants, and they didn't necessarily get along very well. There's a lot of history of conflict there. So she grew up enculturated in a culture that she saw and experienced things and understood things in her view of the world, that led to the way that then she responded in that way of having to feel strong, showing strength over in her defiance of this culture that she did not agree with. And that's what we want to see is happening so much, especially now, all the canceling that they're doing of people who are opposing different political views. It doesn't matter which side, because both sides of the political spectrum were blaming the other party for canceling people who disagreed with them. So don't think I'm picking a side here, people. I'm pointing out human trends and tendencies and behaviors, because we want to recognize we all might do it because we think it makes the world more easy for us. It doesn't make it simpler. It makes it more difficult, and we miss things. We become blind to things. So now, Tara, we're moving to one of the first internet targets, and patient zero, as they say, of the internet age was Who was it?
Monica Lewinsky.
Yes. And which is tragic to me.
I was
And
going to
what
say, this is brutal. Looking back, hindsight is 2020. This was brutal.
Yes, it was. Totally unprepared, totally somebody who had a crush and infatuation with a person who abused their power, who was the president. And then when it got out, did everything they could do to distance themselves from this poor young woman who was just castigated and was dragged over the coals, and the infamous blue dress, and all the political gamification that happened after that, all to try to affect a single person, the president. Again, we build up people, we tear them down.
Yep.
That really then tore down all these other people around the story.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about that story that I remember was I was just getting into news at the time, and Barbara Walters, I believe, did an interview, and it was really Monica Lewinsky's first time coming out and talking. And I thought it was very well done. It really showed a humanistic side of her. It really showed how young she was and how naive she was. And after it was over, the internet went abuzz about what color lipstick she was wearing.
Yeah.
And I was like, but did y'all hear what the interview? Did you hear the interview? And it was just fascinating to me that's what they came away with was, wow, that was a really pretty color lipstick that she had. So it's a fascinating study of the human race on how we process things. But this one was tragic to me because she was so young, and because it was an abuse of power, and because she was really the first sacrificial lamb of the internet.
Yeah. And again, I think people will say, well, that's just human nature. And I'm going to say, I'll always say no. Those are choices that we're making. We have the choice to learn. We have the choice to understand. We have the choice to change.
Yeah.
And even though we might have been socialized and or have some predispositions to behave this way, we still have the ability to stop and look and understand that everybody has a life. Everybody has their hopes and dreams and visions, and everybody has their humanness. We all have our stuff. As I tell people every week, we all have our stuff, and we're going to grow and experience through that stuff that we're here to learn from. That's why I say this is school. This is where we learn. This is where we grow. So step back from these stories and this tendencies. We'll get into the tips later, but this is where, again, we really want to see the power of how these stories can really negatively impact lives. So now we're looking at the modern mob. This is the anatomy of the modern mob. The myth is that we are protecting society. The myth is that we are seeking justice. The myth is that we're holding the powerful accountable. This is justification, rationalization, denial, minimization, maximization of other traits and qualities of others. These are cognitive defenses. These are the things that we tell ourselves that if we realize the power of what's really happening. So we have moral grandstanding, signaling our own virtue. This is what we're doing, our own virtue and moral superiority to our peers. We want to hierarchically be better than others. We've been socialized into that. See it, recognize it, own it. The social vigilantism, spontaneous autonomous punishment executed without due process or proportion. Go back to the Wolfpack. Again, we castigated and destroyed those kids' lives, threw them in jail, had the trial, threw away the key, and they didn't even do it. And look at all these stories we're hearing about now with the Freedom Project, which is that nonprofit project that's helping people to set people free who were accused, who were absolutely innocent with the data and the DNA evidence and the inappropriate use of evidence. We have to look at even the people who are prosecutors of justice who want to be seen as so right. Once they make their opinion up about somebody, they can't change it. So we have to realize how we become the prosecutors of our own sense of justice in how we treat people on the internet and are accusing people and even in the media without even knowing them, their motivations, what their intentions were, what their knowledge base is, and what truth is. And that's critical here.
And I think a big thing for the media when I was there was you have to be first. You have to be the first one on because that's the one that people are going to tune into and that's where they're going to get the ratings. So there was this unbelievable pressure of like, get it on the air, get it on the air. And there wasn't a fact check in the process. Not, I'm speaking very broadly, but there were often times where our sources could not be confirmed, or we couldn't say as much as we wanted to say. And then it was up to the reporter and the news director, the executive producer, how much are we going to say? Because we could have information off the record, but of course you don't share that, or you ruin your relationship with the police, or gave you that information. But we're now in a place where it's almost like all of that is kind of thrown away, in my opinion, because it's more important to be first. Because if you know that you're right, like, you know, this is it. This is the information I have. We're not going to fact check it. We're not going to do it. We're just going to go out there and we're going to say it. I mean, how many times have you seen, there's a famous one because people found it so funny, was in, I believe it was San Francisco, when there was a plane crash and they released the names of the pilots. And it was an intern from the FTA who basically gave them these play on words, you know, like we too low was the and like and like they just kept going, and it was like, oh my God. And now it's this, you know, haha funny on the internet. Unfortunately, you know, like a 16-year-old kid died, I believe, in that plane crash, but nobody sees the retraction, is my point.
Right.
Of course, went back on and they retracted the next day. That might have 30,000 hits, but the one where they messed up the names, that one has millions of hits. So to your point, once you say something, it's out there and you can never take it back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's so important to, again, for everybody to remember in this process as they're doing this. And, you know, and I know from, depending on who you talk to, CNN's gotten a lot of criticism on what they put out there, but I know from being in the back in the studio on major stories, and even talking to the people who work there was something that they were ready to say, that in, you know, hearing in my ear that there's fact checkers, and there's this also a group called the Row that are editorial, that they check everything before it can go on air. And I remember something was ready to be said, and they said, no, you can't say it wasn't verified. And then they found out that it wasn't accurate. So Correct. It's like, you know, so they look at all these things and taking the time that it might not lead, but it's facts. And just because, as you're talking about, if it leads, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's, you know, a discussion we had with Jim Proler, my buddy who worked at CNN for years and, you know, now at another outlet. But we talked about that and the ethics, values, and morals, and what's going on in our newsrooms, even today, and even almost more so today, because it's about eyes on.
Yeah, they're making it more difficult to be a morally high, reputable journalist. They're making it very difficult because we're living in a I want it now society where I can go here. I don't have to wait until 5 o'clock, you know, to get my news. But at the same time, even when they're putting things out, you know, the local media outlets on social media, they still have a responsibility. And I do believe that most of those news stations are taking that responsibility. But those who are not and are first, it's like, oh, wait, you know, Channel 11, turn them on. But did they go through the proper steps?
Right.
And hopefully they did, but I'm personally seeing no. You know, there's now way more times that people are retracting than ever before when I was in news. And because commentary is now allowed. When I was in news, you didn't use pronouns, I, me. I went to the police department and, you know, I got this police report that says blah, 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 blah. That started during my tenure in news. And it was really trippy because it brought the ego into my job. It was like, what do you mean I? Like, no, police report was obtained from the police department. You know, of course I got it, but like, it was weird. It was definitely an adjustment for me. But I think once that introduction, it was called Viewer Advocacy News. And I think once that introduction of Viewer Advocacy News came in, it almost opened up Pandora's box.
Well, and it fosters to me the same narcissistic traits, I will say, that we see in our social media now, because now you have all these individuals who are now becoming reporters. and they're saying
Right.
stuff that isn't about truth. It's, I heard this and I'm going to get it out there, and in any kind of area of the news, so
Sounds the same as what you're seeing on the news, where before it was
yes.
spectacular.
And there's no, and again, where's the truth, honor, and integrity in what's being, said and done here? So, hey, viewers, our episode ran a little long, so we decided to split it into 2 episodes. So stay tuned for the next episode to pick up where we left off. And until next time.
We're selling our souls in the virtual marketplace for a like or a share at warp speed pays. Do you want to connect or just be entertained? In the end, it's become a show and in too many a game. Oh, click like and scroll away. We're all just actors in a fake cabaret. If you say what you want, don't forget you may be losing self-respect in the inner